Welcome everyone to Fresh from the Studio. We're delighted today to have Annie Arnold, Ginger Geyer, and Ariana Gomez share what they're working on now with all of us. Each artist will spend about 10 minutes presenting their work, and after all three artists have done their presentations, we'll have time for your comments, questions, and then we'll learn about what they have coming up next, as well as what Women in Their Work has coming up. Today, we're going to start with Annie Arnold.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Women in Their Work, for having me. I'm excited to share what I've been working on and sort of thinking about in the studio. So I am Annie Arnold. I live and work in Austin, Texas. I am a fiber-based artist, so I like to work with all kinds of materials, but right now fiber is sort of where it starts and ends for me. I do a lot of sewing, thinking a lot about the leisure arts and how we spend our time, and thinking about how to keep my hands and my mind busy to keep me off my phone. Like we sort of get committed or addicted to that fidget. And so I found that sewing and stitching and crocheting is a way for me to keep my body occupied, but keep my mind a little more clear. So that's been a really interesting investigation for me. I started off as an oil painter when I was getting my MFA, and I really love oil painting. I feel like there's something so satisfying about finishing a painting and then just sitting back and getting to really look at it and soak it in. It has a certain gravitas, I think, that really speaks to me as an artist. It was my first love. It's how I fell in love with art and making art. But as I started building my ideas and portfolio, I realized that oil painting was a little slow for me. It didn't give me time to work through ideas as quickly as they were coming on. So I kind of switched to collage. And then once I started having kids, I have two boys, 8 and 10. The being a painter too was really hard because I couldn't have like toxic paint on my hands when I was holding them. And if they woke up early from their nap, I would have a full palette of paint squeezed out, ready to go. And it might be 2 weeks before I ever got back in the studio. So I switched to sewing as a way to sort of fit my new lifestyle. This is something I could do. I can have studio time if I'm sitting in car line at school or waiting for baseball practice to be over. And so it's been a really nice transition, and I can work at the pace that I like and deal with a lot of the ideas and concepts that I'm interested in a really effective way for sort of where I am in life right now. I'm really interested in ideas about narcissism. I like to tackle them with a certain sense of humor and satire. I think internet culture, specifically influencer culture and social media, gives us a lot of content that can be very humorous. And so I do want to have like a critical dialogue about the ways that we're engaging with these things. But I think there's just so much good stuff to laugh about. I have a pretty self-deprecating sense of humor as well, so I try to implicate myself in this work as much as I can, so that I'm not pointing a finger at someone, but collectively thinking like, "Hey guys, how did we all get here?" That sense of humor sort of is why I chose this image for like an intro image or a bio image. It's a picture of me wearing this abstracted garment that I make. A lot of the work I'm working on right now alludes to some kind of clothing item or accessory. And then I take found text and I cross stitch it onto this raw canvas. And then I often pair it with these patches that I make. It's kind of another body of work where I'm taking people's social media pictures that they have posted publicly, and then I adapt them into these like sort of merit badge system. And so this is kind of a good summation of where I am in my practice right now. And I like this phrase a lot. It speaks to me because it's not necessarily a compliment. It's kind of a funny, like backhanded something. But also I think it begs a lot of questions, like, what do I look like? Don't you want me to turn around so that you can sort of compare, or there's like a certain amount of competition, I think that's interesting about that. Um, and so I think it's a good like starter image for the concepts that I'm addressing in my work, which I will sort of depict individually as we get started. The patches are, like I said, they're all based on social media pictures that I have found just by scrolling. I'm really interested in sort of how this language has developed and how we used to take personal photographs, and when we put them in family albums, they were one kind of image for one kind of audience. And now that our photo albums are online and available publicly, I think it's interesting sort of how this new language of personal photography has taken off. And I feel like, to me, these pretty quickly read as social media images. And so I'm interested in sort of what makes them read that way. Um, and I like the whole idea of a merit badge system, where you learn a skill or you demonstrate a skill, or like with travel, like souvenirs and things, like you've been a certain place or you've done a certain thing. I like the way that it communicates to others what your interests are. But then when you make the patch out of the social media picture, it sort of tells you something and nothing at the same time. And I think that's really amusing. I'm interested in the aspirational behaviors that are depicted. I think sometimes that's what makes them read as social media images, but also that concept of aspirational behavior is really interesting and fluid. And so I like to kind of play with that term and thinking about what that term means. This idea of novelty and the shame of being ordinary. I really like that novelty, or I'm really interested in this concept of novelty because I think, too, it's really complex, that we want to be the same as everyone else, but not exactly the same. You want to do it a little bit better. Like maybe we all vacation in Tulum, but I'm staying at a little bit better of a hotel, or like I put together better outfits. But this idea of sort of comparison with others. And so you want to be like different and unique, but also not too different or unique. And the shame of being ordinary, I started thinking about that after I had a discussion with the guy who was giving me kind of some feedback about the patches as objects. And he had mentioned kind of offhand that he would never self-identify as one of these. And I thought that was really interesting. It sort of stuck with me. And so I started thinking about this idea of novelty and how, we don't want to be basic, and just kind of playing with that idea. The critique on sameness is that we're kind of all doing the same thing. So the name of this series is How Can We Get Noticed If We're All Doing the Same Things? And you see like patterns in the way that people post and the things people post about and trends. And so I'm really interested in that and how we can all be different and the same at the same time. But also how the algorithm feeds us sameness. The more you click on something, the more your social media feed, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So just kind of thinking about that stuff too. And then just how content we are to live our lives through our phones, to have this like surrogate experience, that you maybe don't have to have these skills that got these patches, whatever those skills might be. But the patch or the signifier is enough to feel like a valid experience. So the patches, just to kind of continue on that, I'm thinking a lot about bragging as content and the things that we post about. And the patches are a way to sort of streamline the comparison. I'm interested in like over time, maybe having like 1,000 of these patches, and the combination of which patches makes them say something unique or different, the way that we recontextualize. And I think about that as it relates to meme culture, how you have one image and then you have all the different text that informs how you interpret or understand the image. And then the founder of W magazine said one time that empathy and envy are drivers of social behavior. And I think about that again a lot as it's magnified on social media, that it is a lot about making connection. You're either sort of understanding where someone comes from, or you're jealous of what they're doing, and that drives engagement. So, in order to kind of bring all these things together, the merit badges specifically, I started thinking about letter jackets and how um, when you post something on social media, you are essentially bragging about an experience that you've had or a person that you met or a thing you did. Um, and a letter jacket is sort of the same thing, but for a certain time in your life. So you have this, you work really hard, maybe in high school, to run hurdles faster than someone else or to be on the varsity basketball team for all 4 years or whatever. And you work really hard to earn this sort of like status symbol, but it has this really short shelf life. And then, so if you wear it after you graduate, it's not cool, it's kind of lame or whatever. So you just put it in a closet. But it's funny how you work really hard for it and then all of a sudden it's obsolete. And so, kind of playing with that idea of taking these digital things that we brag about, these things that we're proud of, these things that we work hard for. And when you put them on your physical self and make it a tangible object, it has a totally different read. It has a different vibe. And then if you're not an athlete, you can express yourself or your accomplishments or your pithy existence through your tote bag. And so just trying to think about the ways that we signal the things that we're proud of. So putting this into practice, I started making these sort of large scale abstracted garments, thinking about bragging in a digital space, but bringing it into a physical space. I think when you take the disposability of these images away, they're much more impactful. When you think about like how much time it takes to recreate and make this physical thing, it gives it more meaning. And so I'm really interested in how sort of like putting it is to think about the time we're investing in these certain messages and impressions and things. And it's also kind of funny. So, these quotes are supposed to be funny and the patches are supposed to be a little bit funny. And this work is kind of big, and I'm interested in sort of making invisible things visible. So, like, it's a really large scale and it doesn't really have a lot of content all over. It's pretty blank, thinking about just the amount of time we spend scrolling and yeah, just how much time is wasted on social media, but also thinking about ourselves. Hold on a second. Sorry. So raw unstretched canvas, I'm very fascinated, or I started as a painter when I was in graduate school, and I really loved painting. I think it's so gratifying. I just really there's nothing better than finishing a painting and like sitting back and like really appreciating how much work went into it. So as a fiber artist now, I started using raw unstretched canvas because it was a way for me to feel connected to painting. I had to give up painting because I was trying to work through ideas a lot faster than paintings could allow for me, and like the way that I work and the way that I think. But also becoming a mom, I couldn't really take care of little babies with a bunch of mineral spirits on my hands. And then I didn't really have the expectation that I would be in the studio very often. Because with a crying kid, you don't know when they're going to wake up from their nap or how long they're going to sleep. And so if you squeeze out a bunch of paint, it could be 2 weeks before you ever get back to it. So transitioning to fiber art has been really awesome in terms of studio time, because I can take it with me to baseball practice. I can work on things in the car and car line. But I just saw this recently with Art in America, that fiber is the new painting. And then I really like this phrase that it says about how, some artists are able to use fiber and elevate it to the level of painting. So I think sometimes using canvas is a little bit of a joke in my own studio, like a joke to myself about myself. This like, fiber art is thought of as so much less than painting, and just sort of like putting myself in that conversation just based on material alone. I also love the unstretched canvas, raw canvas, because it allows me to continue to manipulate materials even after I consider something finished. So this piece on the left is something that I exhibited in Fort Worth. It was really happy with, but then it sat around my studio for a while, and I just started tearing it apart and made something new. So this diptych on the right is going to be in the Women in Their Work Red Dot Art Spree. It'll be for sale as a part of their fundraiser. And so I kind of like the idea that with the raw unstretched canvas and the way that I work, I can constantly manipulate and reuse kind of depending on what the conversation is I'm interested in having or how I want things to look. Sorry, I have this message on my screen and I can't get it off and I don't know. So some of this I can't read. So hold on one second. Do y'all know how to get this? There we go. Okay, that's a huge help. Okay, text. So the text, like I said, comes from magazines. And this is an example of a phrase that I found that I'll probably embroider at some point. But I like what it says. I like the humor of it. I like it as a standalone thing. And sometimes when I separate the quote that I like out of the context, I like to kind of imagine like what kind of question someone might have been asking to get this kind of response. So this is just kind of an example of like where these quotes come from and what stands out to me. This is a piece I made. As you can see, referencing the letter jackets, the trim on the bottom, the unstretched canvas. I like that it sort of drapes and it comes into your space, like the 3D-ness of it. I like that this is a circular phrase, so you can sort of like, it's a song that never ends. You can just keep rereading it. It feels like an affirmation or, but I'm not sure if you're affirming to yourself or you're saying it publicly to someone else. This is another piece I did. I just really am entertained by, that they had to be French friends and that, you brought the grocery store cheese and that's just a really bad move. I'm really interested in labor versus leisure activities. The fact that play is now measured by standards of achievement previously applicable only to work. And I feel that way a lot on social media, especially where we're constantly having to outdo each other in a way that feels like a job, or you have to really invest. It takes a long time to post and to be relevant online. I'm also interested in the presence of the body in my work, thinking about, again, the letter jacket thing, but how the digital space is connected to our physical space. And if we sort of connected those things in a more direct kind of way, then maybe we would be more conscious of the messaging that we're spending so much time absorbing and putting out into the world. For these, like I said, I'm interested in these abstract garments. So the way that the letter jacket trim drapes at the top and the way it kind of folds and comes into your space, it looks like clothes. I like that it suggests that maybe you could put it on your body and wear it, or maybe you wouldn't because it doesn't reflect your personhood. So I like the push and pull about, like, it kind of brings you in and puts you into this place with the work to sort of like accept or reject what you think about what it's saying. Super interested in fashion. So it's really fun when I have things in my mind or in my studio I'm working on, and then it pops up into like Fashion Week, or it's being advertised to me online through Instagram. So these are just different things like over the last year or two that have I feel like I've been working on, and all of a sudden it shows up. And so I say zeitgeist because I feel very validated when I feel like things are floating around in the cloud above our heads, and then someone that I really respect or is much smarter, more creative than me pulls down the same kinds of things that I'm pulling down. So it's a way for me to sort of feel like I'm interested or chasing some of the same things that other people are interested in. The other thing I think a lot about are time and how much time we spend. That's the one reason I like to sew, because I feel like it makes visible the amount of time that it took to make something, and how that time reflects the things that we care about. And because I think a lot of times we invest in values that are unseen. I think the things that we're liking and sharing on social media are affecting our values in a way that we don't always give it full credit. So once it changes our values, then how are we passing those things on to the next generation? So ideas about legacy and heritage. So thinking about this, like crochet, I always think of like my grandmother. I had a grandmother who crocheted and she was so awesome. She tried to teach me, but I couldn't pay attention. She was like too good. And so I ended up having to learn on YouTube later on in life. But she used to make these things called filet crochet, and she would crochet like our name onto a doily, like the family name. And then my parents still have it hanging up in their house. But I was thinking about this as like a crest or that same kind of thing, like this doily, this pride, sense of pride, and you're passing it on to the next generation, but based on messages that we're sort of absorbing and perpetuating in our current culture. And again, the body is related because it's made of yarn. It feels kind of like a blanket. These are very like body sized. So I don't know if you're like covering yourself with these messages or you're finding comfort in these messages, but kind of playing on that idea. Just very quickly, in 2020, I was a part of the Austin Contemporaries Crit Group, which is super fun and awesome, and it helped my work a ton. This is a picture from that show. Then I got to be in the Crit Group reunion show. Those are my kids. Found my name on the wall. Let's see. I'm talked too long and I'm out of time, so I'm gonna move through this. This is the piece that was in that show. For Thirsty Planet, I got to design a concept for a beer and then make the packaging. So the concept for the beer was an exercise beer, and the patches all came from people exercising while drinking beer. This is a show I did in Fort Worth this last fall. It was really nice to see all these things together and talking to each other. And just to give you a sense of scale and how these things fit together in real life. Next for me, I have a show at the Galveston Arts Center in March in one of the project spaces, and I'm thinking a lot about travel and how Instagram affects like how we document ourselves on the road. So it's been really fun to look at people's travel pictures and think about what's next. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. That was great. Next up, we have Ariana Gomez.
Hey, hello, how's it going? I'm Ariana. Just to kind of briefly really start, I'm in my studio. I'm a second year photo student, photo grad student at the University of Texas at Austin. So really excited to be here. I'm just gonna share a little PowerPoint I made. So I'm just gonna start that real fast. And I have to time this, otherwise I'll go too long. So, okay, so yes, my name's Ariana. I primarily do photography as well as some writing. Most of my work now kind of evolves around family and identity, and trying to hide myself, otherwise I can't see. It's mostly revolving around family and identity, and coming back to a place that I once knew. So I spent about 12 years in New York City. I went to school in upstate New York, but I'm originally from Austin, Texas, from here. So it was a little jarring coming back here after such a long time away. I came back primarily for grad school. So I just want to kind of talk about really, I was kind of trying to figure out what I could do and how I can present it. And I'm just going to kind of go through like a brief history, which I think a lot of people have seen, but I want to just kind of introduce it to all of y'all. So again, I lived in New York City for about 12 years. After school, it was kind of just like the place to go and the place to be. You know, every photography teacher said, you have to go to New York, you have to go to New York, you have to be an assistant, and you have to, once after you assist for a while, then you start shooting, photographing. And so it was just one of those weird moments where it felt kind of surreal to think of it like that. And so when I was in school, in undergrad, I mostly photographed just like, it was mostly people, it was studio setups. I was kind of trying to find my footing. And when I got to New York City, I started doing a lot more like kind of architectural. It kind of really lends itself to that, which is interesting to me. And so I was working with the photographer who was very invested in like the Bauhaus movement, so very like, you know, all about form and function and design. And after working with him for a while, I kind of wanted to get away from that. I did this photo workshop, I guess, in 2018. That was actually kind of, it sounds so cliche, but it was life-changing. I worked with a photographer who I really admire, who photographed portraiture mostly. And of course, you know, it helped a lot that it was in the south of France, which is beautiful. And so I was there for about a week, and after that residency or workshop, I came out with this sense of photography sort of being a lot bigger than myself. There's a lot of things that go into photographing people. I am naturally a introverted person, and so photographing people was always pretty tough for me. So in New York, it was super easy to just focus on buildings and light and beautiful situations. So after this workshop, I started working towards photographing more people, more strangers. And so it kind of just changed how I feel about photography in terms of power dynamics and how you photograph a person. It made me think about how much you have to give of yourself in order to take a photo of someone else. So you're asking someone else to take this image of them and a piece of themselves to give to you, and you're just complete strangers. So during that time, it kind of really opened me up and into a different kind of world, and sort of becoming a bit more open with people around me. And so after then, I started shooting at parks mostly in New York City, which of course, the best thing about New York City parks is that there's always people any time of day doing anything. And I wound up focusing mostly on this one area called Sunset Park. I lived in Brooklyn, so it's a little bit more South Brooklyn. And it was just like a gigantic range of people, which was really, really great. So some of the things in this series are more based off of that. And so it took a lot. I spent an entire summer just mostly working up the courage to talk to people and to talk with them, and not only ask for their photo, but try and spend an extended amount of time with people and hear their stories. It was a little bit difficult in Sunset Park. A lot of the population, the demographics are Asian Americans, people from China, as well as Hispanics population. So a lot of the time we were speaking literally different languages. So it was interesting to try and also like feel vulnerable in that situation where you are not able to fully control a situation. So during that time, I felt like I developed a lot of skills. I was really excited to just continue photographing more and more people. And it was something that I felt that I could really focus on, as well as like during this time, I mean, I've never really thought about photographing my own family or my own identity. It's things I think about a lot, but it's not anything that I think I was still in the baby steps of trying to even just, have a conversation and open up with people. So these are just a few of the images from that Sunset Park. So it was just a kind of just transformative summer of doing this workshop and then moving on and feeling really excited about trying to push forward with where my images could go. Because I hadn't really thought about it in that concept. I was always sort of thinking about how it related to other people's images and how it related to New York images, which are, mostly tend to be, I won't say mostly, but they tend to be more street photography. There's a long history of street photography in New York City, and sort of that idea of taking images rather than making an image with somebody and understanding that it's collaborative with another human being. So I was really on a roll and it was so exciting. And I was starting to kind of open up, and then the pandemic happened and I couldn't talk to anybody. So I had been thinking a lot about sort of events that had happened previous to me. Like the first year I moved to New York City, my father passed away in 2011, and I hadn't really thought about making any kind of art about it or thoughts about it until basically around 2019, and then the pandemic. And so I kind of looked back on a whole archive of images. 2019, I did actually go, just before pandemic happened, I did go and photograph back in Texas. My dad is originally from here, from Austin. And so I felt that there was sort of this connection to a landscape that we both have and we both shared. And so I was thinking the best way to make a project about someone who was already gone. And during the time, I hadn't made really that many images. I think there's a few from, the funeral, but it's nothing like it just felt sort of like a thing to separate myself a little bit. So I decided I wanted to make like a little journal or book, very small. And I called it The Blue of Distance, which is sort of a reference to Rebecca Solnit's essay talking about the atmosphere between people. And so most of these images kind of relate to that. And this is also the first time that I was writing and kind of trying to see how images work together with text to be able to create something. I was always really hesitant about it, about putting my writing in. One, it's vulnerable. Two, it's with social media and everything. I didn't want it to feel like a caption or something that you kind of move past very quickly. So I sat down every once in a while when thoughts would just sort of come naturally. I would just write them as if I was writing a journal. Sometimes it's talking to him, sometimes it's talking to myself, sometimes it's talking to the ether, whatever that may be. And so the whole thing came together when a friend of mine who is interested in creating books asked during the pandemic if anybody wanted to work together. And so we worked together to create this, this homage, I guess. And it was important to me to feel very, that it felt personal, but at the same time, I fully understand that everybody goes through grief. Everybody loses loved ones, whether by death or other means. And so it was pretty important to me to try and find a way to skirt that line of it being about me and my connection to my father through a landscape, but also that people can understand and kind of insert themselves into this idea as well. So I remember getting the critique one time that someone flipped through a really early copy of this and they were like, I don't see your dad in it. Where's your dad? And it sort of, to me, what was more important was the feeling of him and this idea that you can connect to people through a living earth. It's sort of like coming back to your roots in a way. So this one was a huge mixture of different types of images. I kind of shoot with everything. I don't know if that's like a cop out, but I tend to just shoot just very on my phone, on small cameras, with film, with digital. So it's kind of all over the place. So with this book in particular, most of it is film, most of it's square format. But we kind of, with the designer, talked about cropping as a way to move someone through the book. So if y'all ever want to come see it, definitely come to my studio. But yeah, and I felt it was very successful in for a first try in terms of putting together both images and text. Okay, so I did not time this as well as I thought. So, okay, currently, really quickly, I'll move through this. Right now, I came back to Austin and I was very excited about just working with a new idea of mine, which was sort of this more about identity, connecting this idea that I have about a Chicano sort of revolution that happened. And it's to do with having this imaginary or perceived imaginary landscape called Aztlan, which is sort of the beginnings of what we think is Mexico City. But scholars, I guess, have not ever placed an actual landscape to the place. So it started with that idea. Again, connecting land and sort of what does that mean in this like mythical or what you build up in your head and how that connects to you as a person and what are you with the land, basically. If you don't have a land, what is your identity? So there's points of that coming in, but currently, as I moved through last year, it kind of molded a little bit more into very personal. It's sort of an extension of what I was working on with my dad, but now there's a lot more images. It's moving a lot more towards my mom and sort of what our relationship is post, with I'm living with her currently, so sort of what that relationship looks like with the three of us, her, me, and sort of this, my father figure as this non-existent space. So it's in that realm. I've been thinking a lot of recently about a lot more text and sort of we're becoming a lot more collaborative in how we work with things. So with this next year, I've sort of been ruminating on the ideas of us creating something more together. I think she's in this talk, so maybe this is new to her, but so I want to work more with her and kind of talk about her place in all of this. She has a landscape that she has lost. She's from Puerto Rico. We're Puerto Rican as well. And how she is in this like sort of inserted space in this landscape that isn't her own. And so between sort of the three of those things, I've landed on the idea that, she's sort of from this watery landscape. My dad is from this deserty landscape, and how those two come together to kind of create, me and how I am, how I feel about Texas, how I feel about Puerto Rico, just two very different essences. And in the last couple slides, I just want to share with you, I think I'm moving on towards putting in a little bit of black and white, seeing how the two can work together, and how I can move forward and kind of make this a little more diaristic and less perfectly intense. My style of shooting is pretty rigid, and so just kind of incorporating things that have a lot more body and life to it. but yeah, so there's my information. Sorry if I went a little bit over, but thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. And now we're going to move to Ginger Geyer, and I'm going to share your. Oh, geez. So, Ginger, you can tell me when to advance.
Oh, keep going. That's I thought that would go really quickly. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Did that
I think that was it.
Yeah, that's all of it. Hi, I'm Ginger Geyer, and that was a silent movie of places I've had studios. And I'm going to pick up my laptop and walk around a little bit and describe where I am now and what I'm currently working on. So this may be like a dizzy buzz through the universe, but let's see how this works. I'm in my office at the moment, and I'm trying to point to a bunch of sketchbooks that I work on all the time. And there's like 130 of these. And they're mostly writing, but there's some drawings in them. And I index all this stuff, and I have done this for years. So this is really an OCD project where I keep track of all the ideas and different projects that I'm working on. And my studio currently is in a very nasty state of flux because I just moved back home here at home from a 18-month residency over at the Episcopal Seminary of the Southwest, which gave me a wonderful studio space in exchange for some teaching and just hanging out with students. While I was there, I worked a lot on collages. That's what all this rolled up stuff is. Like, what do you do with all this art? The attic above me is full of sculpture. But here, can you see this? Is a detail of one of the collages that I've been working on. This one's called Whitewash, which is part of the very intense interest the last few years where I've really started to understand a whole lot more about white supremacy and Christian nationalism and Black theology, how all that intersects. I have hopes to do painting, and I got out all my supplies and even an easel or two to make myself get back into that, which was what I essentially did in college a million years ago. Collage is going to continue to be an interest. Here's a bunch of this stuff that I file away all the time. This poor lonely thing on the table is a piece waiting to be repaired. So it's kind of like I'm working in all these different media at once, and in the liminal stage, just going to see what floats to the top. Back in here, I've got a lot of books. Here's a sculpture that I did several years ago that's a large porcelain scarecrow. It was in an exhibit in 2000 with my friend Jennifer Cumberbatch. It's at the Neil Cochran House Museum, which is a small historical house museum here in Austin. And women in the work helped me do some of this stuff to get this thing off the ground. It was turned out during the pandemic, of course, and ended up being up about 9 months, which was not the plan originally, but it worked. During that time, I did a lot more work at home, and I got very interested in contemporary Black art and have collected quite a library of that sort of stuff, as well as a lot of museum catalogs. My background was working at the Dallas Museum for a long time and a quick stint at the Kimball. And it kind of put art history into my forefront, and that continues to inform the artwork that I do. I do a lot of adaptations from art history and borrow from all these books. I love to do photography. None of these are mine, but they're all wonderful. Look at that. Collect it. Here's another piece that was in the Neil Cochran show. All right, where are you? Here you go. It's kind of hard to see with the window, but it's a porcelain rendition of a shoe shine box. There's a painting of the Transfiguration of Jesus on there, which has a Black Christ in it, and paintings of other Black artists are all inside this thing. And my friend Jennifer Cumberbatch, who is an incredible actress and artist, she did a monologue based on this piece at the Neil Cochran House, and it was a really, really good springboard off of a ceramic piece to do a performance. And down here at the end of the hall, I've got another collage. This one's, here's close-ups of it. It's one of the early ones I did. It's called Name It. You can kind of see the detail of stuff. They're just little scraps of paper that I've cut out of old children's books. And most of the recent ones also have a vintage wallpaper in them. And this all kind of began at the end of the Neil Cochran show. I put up this piece, which I had done during the pandemic. If you can tell, it's like a toy barn. Play with nostalgic toys a lot. And in this one, it's been stockpiled with toilet paper. And it's also got images from art history on it, and that this is a carving of the Last Judgment from Notre Dame Cathedral. And then that, which is a real scary kind of thing, is contrasted with a mosaic from Ravenna, which is more or less the Good Shepherd. And on the silo is a copy of a Horace Pippin painting and Leonard Cohen's lyrics about old Black Joe's still picking cotton for your ribbons and bows. So all of this has been kind of a self-reckoning for me, understanding my own complicity in judgmentalism and racism, and trying to come to grips with how the church that was meant so much to me also is terribly complicit in all this stuff. And should it be reduced to that? Or can we also see the benefits of it? So often I'm compounding the sacred and the secular, like that photo you had, Ariana, of the Virgin of Guadalupe next to a phone booth. Oh, I just love that. And Annie's wonderful humor and use of words. I really relate to that too. And all the feminist stuff and the whole thing about being a mom and being an artist at the same time. I did that. And they grew up and they had babies. And so now I'm a grandma, which makes it even more fun. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. And thank you for the quick tour. And
Thank you.
hope you stay cool here in Austin. We're trying.
Nice. Wow,
Thanks.
that was fantastic. I've also dropped all of the artists who presented today, their handles for social media as well as their websites in the chat as well. But I think now we can open up the floor for some Q&A for a little bit. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to chime in, or if you'd like to drop them in the chat as well. I'm happy to read them out loud too. But great job, y'all.
Ariana, you talked about in your photographs wrestling with the power dynamics of like photographer and the person, the subject. And I'm interested if you have any thoughts on me taking people's pictures from a public place and appropriating them. Because I get asked about that a lot, and just like, do you have permission? Did you ask permission? And I have my feelings on it, but I'm interested to know, like, as a photographer, did that like make you cringe, or yeah.
I don't think it really made me cringe. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that idea too, because on the one hand, sometimes I think about putting things on the internet and not private. You're in a public space, a public sphere. You're kind of putting your image out there. But then on the other hand, we have a lot of conversations in photography about the artist sort of making money off of someone's image, and whether or not it should be it's ethical, it's if they should be involved in having monetary value. It's a really hard situation. There was a big case at one point where a photographer took an image. He's very famous. The image obviously was selling in gallery spaces, and the person saw that and sued him for his likeness, and he wound up winning the case because it was within this artistic realm. So I go back and forth sometimes. I think it comes down to the artist and how they view themselves, as well as sort of like it can kind of go both ways for me personally. The reason why a lot of my portraits are mostly sort of staged or working with somebody is because when I was in New York, and I'm not like Bruce Gilden, who can like go up to somebody and just like snap their picture and run away. Like, it felt really odd to me. And so, yeah, I think that's like such a hard question. I wasn't like cringy with yours at all. I can kind of see like where it leads to and what it lends to. But I do also kind of feel for people who maybe see that and are kind of like, well, I don't want that. I don't like that. And one of the things that I find interesting when I moved from New York back to Texas, in New York, nobody cared. I could ask them for their image and they were like, yeah, totally. But here there's a lot more tenuousness with it. And I think a lot of that also deals with like immigrant populations and things like that. So I think it depends like who and where you're taking it. Social media feels very public. And so it feels almost okay. So it would be like a hard thing to argue on both ends, I think. So yeah, I know that's not like a real answer, but so.
No, that's interesting because like you said, you're spending a lot of time talking about these things and it's relevant to your work too. And so I was just interested to get a different perspective. So thanks.
Yeah.
I too have had a lot of questions about appropriation. I did a lot of appropriation from art history, mostly stuff that's already in the public realm, more than from contemporary people. But I think there's so many scares about it that it can kind of shut down your process if you think you can't appropriate, because artists have borrowed all through history. That's just part of the deal. Borrowed and redone things, dismantled them and all that. I think it just gets down maybe to more of a matter if you intend to sell it. And my advice is go to hell and make it anyway. And get in trouble, so what? You know, it's not likely that they're going to get sued for doing this.
Have you gotten in trouble at all or had your hand slapped for appropriating? You said you've thought about it a lot or run into it, but I didn't know if there was like an incident.
You know, there really hasn't been, and I've done it for so many years. It's kind of embarrassing. I think it's more because nobody pays attention.
I think attention is a really hard thing to come by for anyone doing anything. You know, it's just like such a saturation of images and content, and I think it's a really hard time to be doing visual things and making visual things because we are so inundated and the screens make it so easy that we don't really have to go looking for meaningful things because there's always something to look at. And the other day I caught myself watching like Hailey Bieber wash her face on Instagram. And I thought like, why? Like I'm just looking at it because it's sitting right here. But yeah, I think it's I think about that attention a lot though.
Yeah,
and
I
just
think it
how
might be kind of important to also think about like kind of the future consequences that could exist, or you know, it's hard to just be like, oh, it was there, so you know, we have to, it's okay. You like, for me, a lot of people don't want their image shown because they, you know, don't have status or something like that. So I think like it could be a case-by-case situation too, you know, of like, okay, I won't show that image, you know, I understand that that is your privacy. So yeah, I think it kind of boils down to like understanding too what their perspective is, in some way, but kind of feeling it out and seeing if it's something that maybe they won't be hurt by it or something, you know. So
Annie, I was real curious about the patches you showed. Are all those embroidered, or is that other sewing techniques like applique, or what are those?
they're all machine embroidered, but I have a manufacturer that makes them. And so I will find the picture that speaks to me, and then I sort of manipulate the image in some way. Like I draw it on my iPad and then I change things and sort of make it fit my purpose. And then I have a company that will produce them for me. So I tried to hand embroider some images and they just look so bad that I couldn't even think about the content because I was just like frustrated by how bad it looked. So that's when I decided to outsource. And it's much faster.
Oh yeah, God, that was really smart of you to figure that out.
Well, if you would have seen
the
this earlier,
outsourcing
we're
part
very-
is yeah.
Nice. Well, it's a little bit over 1. So I am going to just sort of start wrapping this up. And really, I want to thank the artists so much for your presentations as well as this great discussion. And also let you guys know that we have some upcoming events about women and their work. Today we have our 3rd Thursday, so we'll be open late until 9 if anybody would like to stop by. And then on Saturday of August 26th at 2 p.m., we have a talk about with our current solo exhibiting artist, Dan Gian. And then next month, we do have our Red Dart Art Spree coming up, and that's going to be on September 14th. Tickets are live, and we also have a ticket giveaway contest on Instagram right now. And then I'd also like to add, Annie, I know you mentioned you have your show next year at the Galveston Art Center. So that's in March 2024. Ginger, Ariana, do you have any upcoming events that you'd like to plug right now?
No, I don't have anything right now. I'm in the liminal state where I've got many irons in the fire, but I can't announce anything. So
Oh,
it always comes about somewhere or another, but who knows?
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, I actually have a few things coming up next semester, in the spring or, January, thinking on school terms. I will have our thesis show here at UT, which is really exciting. And there's, everyone in this year's cohort is really talented and amazing. So y'all should definitely check it out. I will be part of the VAC show, sort of about identity. And then I have like a 1-week window dressing thing at ICOSA. That'll be like the end of February. So.
Fantastic. And also congratulations on your upcoming graduation.
Thank you.
Well, great job, everyone. And thank you, everyone who could join us for this great artist talk. It'll be up on our social media, YouTube, and website soon. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks
Thank you
again.
for your work. You're amazing.
Yes, thank you. We
Thank
love
you.
y'all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.